Welcome to Alpha News Studio. My name is Kara Main, and my guest today is Leo Bagdasarian, the producer of the audiobook of Clash of Histories in the South Caucasus. Thank you so much for coming, Leo. Welcome to our studio.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to ask about your work. Please tell me, how did you come about producing this audiobook?
Well, it was around the time of the Second Artsakh War. Soon after, I saw that we needed a work that clearly explained the complex history of the region. How do we know and how do we define the borders of that region? In particular, how do we know how to define Armenia's borders? This is a fundamental question that was occurring at the turn of the last century. And you have a state that pops up called Azerbaijan that had not previously existed. It was founded in 1918, and it was founded as a result of various movements at the time, that being Pan-Turkism, as well as the Musavat Party, who was unifying Turks in that area. And prior to 1918, there was no designation of the toponym Azerbaijan north of the Araks River. The book is Clash of Histories in the South Caucasus, and it goes into how the political bodies at the time were rewriting and redrawing boundaries for their own objectives.
The author of this book is Professor Galichian. Can you please tell me about him?
Professor Galichian is an amazing mind. He has been working in, his background is in engineering. He grew up in Iran, and he studied engineering, and he worked in the petrochemical gas industry internationally. And he's been committed to cartology and cartography for the past 40 years and has an honorary doctorate. What's amazing about him is he is diligent and methodical in his work. He's detail-oriented, and he doesn't leave any stone unturned. And much like myself, we are committed to trying to find the truth behind historical facts and events.
That leads me to the next question. Why did you decide to finance the production of the audiobook?
So the 2020 war was, I would even call it a military operation. And this also goes to the heart of a lot of the topics in the book, in that when the state of Azerbaijan was created, from its inception, there has always been this drive to appropriate and destroy its neighboring populations, that being Armenian, Iran. So when the 2020 war, the Second Artsakh War occurred, I saw a lot of the arguments taking place online. You know, these Azeri bots and whatnot were just fluttering Twitter. And the book itself, so this book was published originally in 2012. That's over 10 years ago. And its predecessor, The Invention of History, was 2009 and republished 2010. So these arguments were pretty well orchestrated, and were, as they say, winning the hearts and minds of a lot of people, falsely so. And what I saw was the lack of proper response online. It goes to even a deeper question that, do you remember the 2002 movie Arat? In that movie, Aznavour, the character that plays Aznavour, says, why did they hate us? Who are these people that hate us so much? And when the 2020 military operation occurred, I just saw it was a kind of a collision of my past research and all the history that I've been studying, and it came to the point where I saw that there was a lack of knowledge. I wasn't satisfied before, and especially during the war, with the idea of, they're Turks, they hate us. That's not an objective reason. So I started combing through different books that I had read, over the years regarding Artsakh and Karabakh. And Clash of History in the South Caucasus just stood out as a clear piece of text that makes the claims, says who, the what, the when, the why, and it's very clear in describing the history. So why I created it was to make it available to the Armenian people. So our history is not lost. So the truth comes out. And that's fundamental in this information war for our lands and our history and our territory.
What is the single most important idea from the book?
The single most important, I would say there are two integral points. The first being, there is content that would not be available to a wider audience, an English-speaking audience. You have to know that the territory there has multiple languages, Turkish, Russian, Armenian, Azerbaijani, Farsi, and a lot of the Arabic, a lot of these texts are not available to European languages, are not available to English-speaking, are not available to Armenians in the diaspora here. It's so important for Armenians in diaspora to know what is going on in the homeland. And so this book and this audiobook makes it so much easier and accessible to learn these facts and historical events. The second point I would say is, look, we're an ancient civilization, and we're an advanced civilization that arose organically. What do I mean by that? We had our own monetary system, we had our own legal system, we had our own scholars, we had our own monuments, we had all these aspects that make for a civilized, high civilization. And so here we come out of nowhere, this state, and it starts appropriating all these aspects from Iran, from Armenia. So the Armenian nation, the Armenian people are not exempt from the laws of nature, and they're not exempt from the actions of war. And this is the fundamental message. Writing history is as important as making history, and you better be ready to fight tooth and nail, to learn, to preserve, to develop it, and pass it on. And not doing so is to your detriment.
It's interesting and really important point, because Mammadova, one of the fabricators of the history, she confirmed herself and said many times that Haydar Aliyev made sure that she and her colleagues wrote criticism on every single history book that was ever published in Armenia. So on the state level, they want to make sure there is a proper response to every single book, history book that published in Armenia. So why we don't do the same?
I'm not a policymaker in Armenia. I think there are Armenian scholars have done an amazing job over history to preserve and present. And in the 1960s, there was a major push to preserve and present Armenian history. And the book makes that point that in 1960, the Azerbaijani state mechanism, although we were in the Soviet Union, we were part of one whole block. Խորհրդային տարիները, ասում են, լավ տարիներ են, մենք բոլորս խորհուրդ ենք, այդ հանգիստ ապրում ենք. I don't believe that. I think that's a lie. That's one of the biggest lies that is propagated. And we have to remember, this state came into being to appropriate the culture. See, they say the motto of Azerbaijan is the land of fire, right? No, the motto of Azerbaijan is we're going to steal your history and burn it, and if it doesn't comply with our narrative, then it doesn't comply with our political aims.
To reiterate this point, Azerbaijan's alphabet had 7 editions and 7 changes, major changes, only in the 20th century. So first it was Arabic. From 1922 to 23, there was one edition. Then from 1933 to 35, then from 35 to 58, first Cyrillic version was introduced. And then from 58 to 91, from 91 to 92, and then in 1992, they have the current version of their alphabet. Now, the Armenian alphabet, on the other hand, was invented by Mesrop Mashtot in 405, as everybody knows, and since then it had only 2 editions, 2 letters, O and F. That's it. So my question to you is, do you think it's done purposely by the state to make sure that young people, young Azeris, should they be interested in learning the other side's point of view, they won't be able to access those books and learn about it?
I don't think it's being over history has been done purposefully. I think as certain events occurred, such as during the Soviet era, they adopted the Cyrillic alphabet and it changed. During the 20th century, they went from Arabic or Farsi script to Latin script. As these changes are going, there is other international political currents. They're using it as a mechanism to hide history, to distort history, and the book Rouben Galichian covers this in detail in the book. In that when books are reprinted or reproduced, they just very liberally change names. It's Armenia, it's Albania. They leave out Armenia in some parts completely. When they translate from Islamic texts, they just completely not mention Armenia. So that's and I encourage everyone to listen and read the book, because this is just a general overview. The book itself goes into much more detail and makes a more methodical argument and systematic argument for it.
That's exactly my point. Those translations make it so easy to falsify it and make up history as you will. For example, Farida Mamadova was one of those authors, and her mentor, Professor Buyarov, was another one. What does this book tell us about those so-called historians?
So the book notes a couple examples and notes Mamadova and Bunyatov in detail and references their works and what works they were changing. To understand, Bruce Lee had this wonderful quote. It says, I don't know if you watch Enter the Dragon. It's a classic movie from the 70s. He's teaching a student, and a student messes up, and he points his finger and says, do not focus on the finger or you'll miss all that heavenly glory. And do you know what he means by that?
What?
He means focus on the essence, focus on the core aspects. And the core aspect is this: we had a genocide. 80% of our genetics was gone and it'll never come back. It's just forever gone, and the Armenian question is still pending. It's not resolved. For Azerbaijan, they were a part of the Pan-Turkic movement. They were trying to solve the Armenian question, and the Armenian question essentially is, if there are no Armenians, no question. And it goes back to the point I made earlier. Who's defining Armenia's borders? Four soldiers were killed earlier this week within Armenian territory. I mean, these are fundamental questions. Մենք հայրս պետք է մեզ հարցնենք, մենք ով ենք, որտեղից ենք եկել, որտեղ ենք ուզում ենք գնանք։ Մենք ոնց գնանք, որտեղ մենք պատկերացնում ենք, որտեղ մենք ցանկանում ենք, մենք ոնց ենք որոշելու մեր ապագան, եթե մենք կոնկրետ չգիտենք, if we don't know and define our future. If we're going to let somebody else define the territory and how the show is going to be run, then I'm sorry, Armenia will lose its status as a republic. And this goes, I mean, this book makes the arguments and conveys the history as to what mechanism is being used, and we're seeing this mechanism come to life. It's amazing that he wrote this back in 2009.
So what are some of the arguments so basically what they claim and how do we counter that? If you could give me, 3 to 5 bullet points, that would be great.
Sure. Let me actually grab the book. And these are arguments I saw online. Let's see. It says the main claims made for the myths are as followed, and these are the Azerbaijani myths, which quick segue, I was in Venice. And they had, in the main piazza there, they had an Azerbaijani, funded by the Heydar Aliyev Foundation, an art exhibit on peace and love, right? Kind of funny. And at the end, they had all these big books on Azerbaijani history and how the Azerbaijanis are ancient. And if you're a 14-year-old Azerbaijani kid, if you're just a 14-year-old kid anywhere, you're trying to find out who you are and where you came from. And it's a shame. It's kind of like North Korea. Your source of knowledge is limited.
Azerbaijan is dictatorship. That's all you need to know. That basically all the propaganda, everything works as it works in its dictatorship.
So it says the main claims made are as followed. 1. The Azerbaijani state has almost 5,000 years of continuous history in the present region.
Okay.
I saw that in publications. It's actually on our Instagram page, Clash_of_Histories. 2. Azerbaijan, as an independent state, has existed for more than 2,000 years. You show me an Islamic source that states that.
It doesn't exist. Okay.
Show me. The Turkification of Azerbaijan began from the early days of our era.
But that doesn't compute.
That doesn't make sense because you had the Turks coming to the area.
Much later.
Various empires such as Iran, the Arab Caliphate, and Russia have colonized Azerbaijan, neutralizing its Turkic culture, which is the reason that the gems of Azerbaijani literature were written in Persian. You're a 5,000-year-old civilization, and you don't have your own writing system. Questionable. A joint conspiracy. Oh, this one's a good one. This one is. A joint conspiracy by Russia and Persia divided the country into southern and northern Azerbaijans.
Hence the name, right?
Made up terms later on. And southern Azerbaijan, quote, southern Azerbaijan is the claims that the current intellectuals of the country are making on northern Iran. The last point. In 1918, the establishment of the Republic of Azerbaijan was the rebirth of the historical land of Azerbaijan, as you can see previously referred to, which was the first democratic republic in the East. So these are claims, and they spent millions on propagating this, on promoting this.
And the book goes in detail explaining.
The book goes in detail one by one, breaking these points down. I would just take the first point. The Azerbaijani state has almost 5,000 years of continuous history in the present region. Okay, you've had historians, you've had conquerors, you've had kings, you've had emperors. Where is the mention of Azerbaijan as it relates to the Republic of Azerbaijan today, north of the Arax River, in history, and even in Islamic history? There simply does not exist. And very key, very important here is to note that Azerbaijan the word itself has its roots to ancient times, but it's south of the Arax River, not north.
Which is in Iran right now.
Which is modern day Iran. To confuse things even more, the province of Iran, south of the Arax River, is divided into 3 parts: eastern, western Azerbaijan, and Ardabil. So once you get the name straight, the wording, and once you know the purpose of why this state came about, you go back to, it becomes simple. You see the moon instead of the finger that keeps pointing and distracting.
Right. And speaking of which, right now they are claiming Western Azerbaijan, which makes me laugh, and every single Armenian is just kind of rolling their eyes. But given what they were doing for, decades now, right?
Yeah.
Falsifying history. They keep doing it right now with Western Azerbaijan. And one cannot help but wonder if it's truly dangerous what they're doing, and how do we counter that?
Okay, I actually have a perfect quote for that, and I want to share that with your audience. We tend to undermine this. Like, yeah, we've been around. We're thousands of years old. We've had kings. We have Tigran the Great, and we undermine their approach. I think that is very dangerous. I think that's very dangerous in that, look, during 2020, during that, and I called it a military operation, the Second Artsakh War, or Nagorno-Karabakh War, because these two entities have been at war with each other, even within the Soviet Union, since this inception. This is a quote by Karl von Clausewitz. It says, "The political objective is the goal. War is the means of reaching it, and the means can never be considered in isolation from their purpose. The final objective is to falsify history, to make it legitimate, whether it's for convincing the population or for international purposes, to delegitimize Armenia's claims to our whatever is left of our land currently." And this type of rhetoric materializes into what we saw in 2020, and it will materialize into a war that we are seeing potentially, God forbid, around the corner.
What can Armenia do about it, or Armenians?
I would say, if you value the future of your children, if you value the future, եթե դուք ձեր ապագա սերունդներին արժեքավորում եք, եթե դուք իրոք հայություն արժեքավորում եք, հարկավոր է, որ ամեն մի մարդ իր պատմությունը իմանա եւ սովորի. It is vital for each person to know and learn the history, because this is where policies come from. It's one of the games is, how do we legitimize action? And when we go to the voting booths here or in Armenia, it is ideas that motivate us. It is ideas that get us moving. It is ideas at the end of the day that put weapons in the hands of people. So we have to know our history and what we're willing to fight for. And more important, what should we expect from the enemy?
Thank you so much, Leo. My last question would be, what is your next book that you're hoping to produce?
So I'm looking I'm looking at a variety of books. This is a short booklet actually. Rouben Galichian came out with. I had a chance to meet with him when I was in Armenia. He has a lovely little studio where he reads and writes and produces amazing books. And right now, I had a chance to preview his work on the borders and what is being done with the borders and how do we establish the proper borders. So bringing this information to light, how the borders changed during the Soviet period, which I cover on our Instagram page, making it more accessible. Also, it's important to know our genetic history. So a potential book on the Armenian genetic history, genofondo. So this is our geographical genetics. So Rouben Galichian has done an amazing job, and there's another amazing gentleman in Armenia who's written a book on Armenian genetics and its history. So we might see that in light. Have an audiobook on that soon.
Hopefully. And how do people find you online? And if it's for free to listen to the audiobook?
So we've at the time made it available for everyone. It's clashofhistories.com. or our Instagram page, clash_of_histories. I would also recommend Armen Tatoyan and Lindsay Snell, who are reporting extensively on this matter. We post their posts regularly, so you could follow us on Instagram and visit clashofhistories.com.
Thank you so much, Leo. Thank you so much for coming to our studio today.
you.
My guest today was Leo Bagdasarian, and I'll see you next time.